I came back to the house after the night shift, and there was my mother-in-law making lunch, wearing nothing but my husband's shirt. The kitchen smelled like garlic and betrayal, and the moment our eyes met, I knew my entire life was about to collapse. My name is Sarah, I'm 32 years old, and I work as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in downtown Chicago. That morning in late September, when the autumn wind was already biting through the streets, I dragged myself home after 12 exhausting hours of dealing with emergencies, difficult patients, and the constant pressure of saving lives. All I wanted was to take a hot shower, eat something warm, and sleep until my body stopped aching. But what I found when I opened the door of my own house was something I could never have imagined, not even in my worst nightmares. My mother-in-law, Patricia, was standing in front of the stove, stirring a pot with one hand while holding a wooden spoon with the other. Her graying hair was loose, falling over her shoulders, and she was wearing one of Michael's favorite shirts, the blue one with thin white stripes that I had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. The shirt barely covered her thighs, and she wasn't wearing anything else. No pants, no skirt, nothing. My brain took a few seconds to process the scene, as if my mind was refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. She turned to me with a smile that seemed rehearsed, almost theatrical, and said in a casual tone, as if there was nothing wrong with the situation, that she was preparing lunch for Michael because he had told her he was tired and needed to rest. If you're enjoying the story, help the channel grow and click subscribe. Your subscription is really important for us to reach the milestone of 1,000 subscribers together. I stood there, frozen at the entrance, my work bag still hanging from my shoulder, my white sneakers dirty from the hospital floor. The sound of the pot bubbling on the stove seemed amplified, echoing in my ears like a sinister soundtrack. Patricia continued to smile, but there was something in her eyes, a glint of defiance, of provocation, that made my stomach turn. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, what she was doing there, dressed like that, in my house, in my kitchen. She shrugged, as if the question was absurd, and replied that she had come to visit her son, that there was nothing wrong with a mother taking care of her child, and that I shouldn't be so dramatic. Dramatic. That word echoed in my mind like a slap. I looked around, searching for signs of Michael, but the house was silent except for the sound of the stove and Patricia's light humming. I asked where my husband was, and she pointed with a spoon toward the bedroom, saying he was resting because he had worked late the night before. That didn't make sense. Michael worked at an accounting firm, and his hours were always regular, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. He had never mentioned working late, much less on a Tuesday night. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, a mixture of confusion, anger, and something worse, a creeping suspicion that was starting to take shape in my mind. I walked past Patricia, without saying another word, my feet heavy as lead, and headed toward the bedroom. The door was ajar, and when I pushed it open, I found Michael lying in bed, his eyes closed, apparently asleep. He was shirtless, the sheets tangled around his waist, and his face had that relaxed expression of someone who had just woken up or was about to fall asleep. I called his name, first softly, then louder, until he finally opened his eyes and looked at me with a confused expression. He asked what I was doing there, as if I were the intruder, as if this weren't my own house. I felt rage rising in my chest, hot and suffocating, and I asked him what his mother was doing in our kitchen, half naked, cooking lunch, as if she owned the place. Michael sat up in bed, rubbing his face with his hands, and said in an irritated tone that I was exaggerating, that his mother had just come to visit and had decided to make lunch, that there was nothing wrong with that. I asked why she was wearing his shirt, why she wasn't wearing proper clothes, and he replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, that she had spilled coffee on her dress, and he had lent her a shirt so she could change. Press the red subscribe button right now and be part of this community. The explanation seemed reasonable on the surface, but something inside me screamed that it wasn't true, that there was more to this story than he was willing to admit. I left the bedroom and went back to the kitchen, where Patricia was now setting the table with plates, cutlery, and glasses. She had put on an apron over Michael's shirt, which somehow made the scene even more disturbing. I asked where her dress was, the one she had supposedly spilled coffee on, and she pointed to the washing machine, saying she had already put it to wash because she didn't want the stain to set. I opened the washing machine and found, in fact, a light blue dress, wet and soapy, with a dark stain near the neckline. But something about the stain didn't look like coffee. It was too dark, almost brown, and it had a different texture, as if it had been there for hours, not minutes. I closed the washing machine and turned to Patricia, who was now pouring orange juice into the glasses with a serene smile on her face. I asked how long she had been there, and she replied that she had arrived early in the morning, around 7, right after I had left for work. That meant she had been in my house for almost 6 hours, alone with Michael, cooking, cleaning, and God knows what else. I felt my hands start to shake, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Michael appeared in the kitchen, now dressed in jeans and a white t-shirt, and asked if lunch was ready. Patricia said yes, with a tone of satisfaction, and invited us to sit down. I couldn't eat. I sat at the table, staring at the plate of pasta with tomato sauce that Patricia had prepared, while she and Michael talked as if everything was normal. They talked about trivial things, about the weather, about a cousin who was getting married, about a television show they both liked. I felt invisible, as if I weren't there, as if my presence didn't matter. At one point, Patricia turned to me and asked if I was okay, if I was feeling sick, and I replied, with a smile that I knew was forced, that I was just tired from work. She nodded with a look of false concern and said I should rest more, that I worked too much, that I needed to take better care of myself. We're close to 1,000 subscribers, and you can be part of this achievement by clicking subscribe. After lunch, Patricia said she needed to go because she had an appointment with a hairdresser. She went to the bedroom to change into her dress, which she took out of the washing machine and dried with a hairdryer. When she came out, she was dressed normally, her hair tied back in a bun, and she said goodbye to Michael with a long hug and a kiss on the cheek. She said goodbye to me with a nod and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When the door closed behind her, I felt the tension in my body explode like a balloon that had been inflated too much. I turned to Michael and asked what the hell was going on. He looked at me with an expression of surprise, as if he didn't understand what I was talking about. I said his mother had been in our house for 6 hours, half naked, cooking and cleaning as if she lived here, and he thought that was normal. He replied that I was being paranoid, that his mother just wanted to help, that she was a lonely woman who liked to feel useful. I asked why he hadn't told me she was coming, why he hadn't warned me, and he said he didn't think it was necessary, that it was just a casual visit. The following days were a nightmare. Patricia started coming to our house more frequently, always when I was at work. Michael said she came to clean, to cook, to do the laundry, things he claimed I didn't have time to do because of my shifts at the hospital. I started to notice small changes in the house. Things were in different places. My favorite coffee mug was replaced by another. The cushions on the sofa were arranged differently. The smell of Patricia's perfume lingered in the air, a heavy, floral scent that made me nauseous. One day, I found a hairbrush that wasn't mine in the bathroom, with long gray hairs tangled in the bristles. When I asked Michael about it, he said his mother must have forgotten it there. If you're enjoying the story, help the channel grow and click subscribe. Your subscription is very important for us to reach the mark of 1,000 subscribers together. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I tried to talk to my friends about what was happening, but they all said I was exaggerating, that Patricia was just a concerned mother, that I should be grateful for her help. I even tried to talk to my own mother, but she said I was being jealous and possessive, that I needed to learn to share Michael with his family. No one seemed to understand what I was feeling, the sensation that my home was being invaded, that my marriage was being infiltrated by a presence I couldn't control. One night, I came home earlier than usual. My shift had been cut short because the hospital was overstaffed, and I decided to surprise Michael with his favorite dinner. When I opened the door, I heard laughter coming from the living room. I walked in quietly and found Michael and Patricia sitting on the sofa, watching television together. She was wearing another one of his shirts, this time a gray one, and her legs were curled up under her, bare and relaxed. Michael had his arm resting on the back of the sofa, almost around her shoulders, and they were laughing at something on the screen. They looked so comfortable, so intimate, that I felt like I was intruding in my own house. I cleared my throat loudly, and they both turned to look at me. Michael jumped up from the sofa, looking guilty, and Patricia smiled that same rehearsed smile. She said she had come to watch a movie with Michael because he had mentioned he was bored. I asked why she was wearing his shirt again, and she said, with a light laugh, that it was more comfortable than her own clothes, that she hoped I didn't mind. I said I did mind, that I minded a lot, and that I wanted her to stop coming to my house without warning. Patricia's smile disappeared, and she looked at Michael with an expression of hurt, as if I had just insulted her. Michael said I was being rude, that his mother was just trying to be nice, and that I had no right to talk to her like that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own husband was defending his mother against me, in my own house, as if I were the problem. I said I needed to talk to him alone, and Patricia said in a sweet voice that she would leave, that she didn't want to cause any problems. She got up from the sofa, went to the bedroom to change, and left without saying goodbye. When the door closed, Michael turned to me with an expression of anger and said I had embarrassed him, that I had treated his mother like a stranger. Hit the subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. We're almost there, and your support makes all the difference. We had a huge fight that night. I said his mother was crossing boundaries, that she was behaving inappropriately, and that he needed to set limits with her. He said I was jealous, that I was trying to come between him and his family, that I was being selfish. I asked if he really didn't see anything wrong with his mother walking around our house half-naked, and he said I was sexualizing an innocent situation, that his mother was old enough to be beyond suspicion. That phrase stuck in my mind. Beyond suspicion. As if age were a shield against inappropriate behavior. The situation got worse. Patricia started calling Michael several times a day, always when I was at work. I found out because I checked the phone bill and saw dozens of calls, some lasting more than an hour. When I confronted Michael, he said they were just talking, that his mother was lonely and needed someone to talk to. I asked why he couldn't set boundaries, why he couldn't tell her he was busy, and he said I was being cruel, that I was trying to isolate him from his family. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was the only one who saw how wrong this all was. One day, I decided to come home in the middle of my shift. I told my supervisor I wasn't feeling well and left the hospital early. When I got home, the door was unlocked. I walked in quietly and heard voices coming from the bedroom. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I felt my hands go cold. I walked down the hallway slowly, each step feeling like an eternity, until I reached the bedroom door. It was ajar, and I could see inside. Michael was lying on the bed, and Patricia was sitting next to him, her hand on his chest, talking in a low, intimate voice. She was wearing one of his shirts again, and her hair was loose, falling over her face. Subscribe now and be part of our community as we reach 1,000 subscribers together. I pushed the door open, and they both turned to look at me. Patricia didn't move her hand from Michael's chest, and he didn't push it away. I asked what was going on, and Patricia said in a calm voice that Michael had a headache and she was just helping him relax. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to say something, to explain, but he just looked away, his face red with what I hoped was shame, but looked more like irritation. I said I wanted Patricia to leave immediately, and she said, with a sigh, that she was just trying to help, that I was being unreasonable. Michael finally spoke. He said I was overreacting, that his mother was just being caring, and that I needed to calm down. I felt something inside me break. I realized that no matter what I said, no matter how I felt, Michael would always defend his mother. I was the outsider in my own marriage. I walked out of the bedroom, grabbed my car keys, and left the house. I drove around the city for hours, crying, trying to understand how my life had come to this. I thought about our wedding, about the vows we had made, about the promises of love and respect. None of it seemed to matter anymore. When I finally went back home, it was late at night. The house was dark, and Michael was asleep in bed. I lay down next to him, but I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, and I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, feeling like an intruder in my own home, competing with my mother-in-law for my husband's attention. The next morning, I told Michael we needed to go to marriage counseling. He resisted at first, saying we didn't need it, that I was making a big deal out of nothing, but I insisted. I said it was either counseling or divorce, and that got his attention. We started seeing a therapist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Helen Carter, who had a calm, reassuring presence. In our first session, I explained everything that had been happening, the visits, the shirts, the inappropriate intimacy. Michael defended his mother, saying she was just being helpful, that I was being paranoid. Dr. Carter listened to both of us without interrupting, and then she asked Michael a simple question. Do you think it's appropriate for your mother to wear your clothes and spend so much time in your home when your wife is uncomfortable with it? Michael hesitated, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect moment. Click the subscribe button and help us grow this community. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Carter helped us unpack the dynamics of our relationship. She explained the concept of emotional enmeshment, how some parents, especially mothers, have difficulty separating their identity from their children, and how that can be damaging to a marriage. She pointed out that Michael's inability to set boundaries with Patricia was enabling her behavior and hurting our relationship. Michael started to see things differently. He admitted that he had always felt responsible for his mother's happiness, especially after his father died, and that he had trouble saying no to her. We made an agreement. Michael would talk to Patricia and set clear boundaries. She could visit, but she had to call first. She couldn't come over when I wasn't home. She had to wear her own clothes. Michael was nervous about the conversation, but he knew it was necessary. When he finally talked to Patricia, she didn't take it well. She cried. She accused me of turning her son against her. She said I was destroying their family. Michael stood his ground, though it was hard for him. He told her he loved her, but that his marriage had to come first. Patricia stopped visiting as frequently after that. When she did come over, she was cold and distant with me, but at least she respected the boundaries. Michael and I continued with therapy, working on our communication, on rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wondered if our marriage could survive, if the wounds were too deep to heal. But slowly, things started to improve. Michael became more attentive, more aware of my feelings. He started to prioritize our relationship over his mother's demands. One evening, about 6 months after that terrible morning when I found Patricia in my kitchen, Michael came home with flowers and a handwritten note. The note said, "I'm sorry for not seeing what was right in front of me. You are my priority, and I promise to never let you feel second again." I cried when I read it, not tears of sadness, but of relief. We held each other for a long time, and I felt for the first time in months that we were going to be okay. Patricia eventually came around, though our relationship would never be warm. She remarried a year later to a retired teacher she met at a community center, and she became less dependent on Michael for emotional support. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and your click on the subscribe button can make all the difference. Thank you for being part of this journey. Looking back, I realize how close I came to losing everything because of a situation I couldn't control. The experience taught me the importance of boundaries, of standing up for myself, and of not letting anyone, not even family, undermine my marriage. It also taught me that love isn't just about grand gestures and romantic moments. It's about the willingness to have difficult conversations, to admit when you're wrong, and to fight for the relationship even when it's hard. Michael and I are stronger now, but we carry the scars of what we went through. We're more careful, more aware, and more committed to protecting what we've built together. The last time I saw Patricia was at Christmas dinner at her new husband's house. She was polite, even pleasant, and she didn't try to dominate the conversation or make everything about her and Michael. We exchanged pleasantries, and when we left, Michael squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up on us." I squeezed back and said, "Thank you for finally choosing me." As we drove home through the snowy streets of Chicago, the city lights twinkling like stars, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we had fought for it. That was enough. After months of fighting for my space, I finally understood. Sometimes the biggest threat to a marriage isn't another woman, it's the one who raised him. I thought the worst was behind us after Patricia remarried and the boundaries were established, but life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. About 8 months after that Christmas dinner, Michael came home one evening with a troubled expression on his face. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, chopping vegetables for stir-fry, when he walked in and sat down at the table without saying hello. That wasn't like him. Since we had worked through our issues in therapy, he had made it a point to always greet me with a kiss when he came home. I turned around, wiping my hands on a dish towel, and asked what was wrong. He looked up at me with tired eyes and said that Patricia's new husband, Richard, had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors had given him 6 months, maybe less. My stomach dropped. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't wish suffering on anyone, and I knew what this meant for Michael. Patricia would need support, and Michael would feel obligated to provide it. I put down the knife I was holding and sat across from him at the table. I reached for his hand and told him I was sorry, that it was terrible news. He squeezed my hand and said he knew this was going to be difficult for us, but that he had to help his mother through this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're building something special here, and your support helps us reach more people. Click that subscribe button and join our community. Over the next few weeks, the situation unfolded exactly as I had feared. Patricia started calling Michael constantly, sometimes in the middle of the night, crying about Richard's deteriorating condition. Michael would get up, go into the living room, and talk to her for hours, trying to comfort her. I understood that she was going through something terrible, that watching someone you love die is one of the hardest experiences a person can face. But I also felt the old anxiety creeping back, the fear that Patricia would once again consume all of Michael's time and energy, leaving nothing for me. Michael started spending his weekends at Patricia's house, helping with Richard's care. He would drive the 45 minutes to their home in the suburbs every Saturday morning and wouldn't return until late Sunday night. I tried to be supportive, to understand that this was a temporary situation, that once Richard passed away, things would return to normal. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to feel like I was losing my husband all over again. We barely spent any time together. Our conversations became brief and transactional, mostly about schedules and logistics. The intimacy we had worked so hard to rebuild started to fade. One Saturday, about 3 months after Richard's diagnosis, I decided to go with Michael to Patricia's house. I thought that maybe if I was there helping with the situation, I would feel less isolated, less like I was competing for Michael's attention. Michael seemed surprised when I suggested it, but he agreed. When we arrived, Patricia answered the door with red, swollen eyes. She looked exhausted, her hair uncombed, wearing a bathrobe even though it was past noon. She barely acknowledged me, just nodded in my direction before turning to Michael and collapsing into his arms, sobbing. Michael held her while she cried, stroking her hair and whispering that everything would be okay. I stood there awkwardly, holding a casserole I had prepared, not knowing what to do or where to go. Finally, Michael looked over Patricia's shoulder and mouthed "kitchen" to me. I walked through the house to the kitchen and put the casserole in the refrigerator. The house was a mess. Dishes were piled in the sink, there were papers and medication bottles covering every surface, and the air had that stale, sick smell that comes from long illness. I started cleaning, washing the dishes, organizing the medications, wiping down the counters. It felt good to do something useful, to contribute in some concrete way. If you're finding value in this story, please take a moment to subscribe. Your subscription means the world to us and helps us continue creating content. Richard was in the bedroom, and I could hear the faint sound of a television playing. Michael came into the kitchen after about 20 minutes and thanked me for cleaning. He said his mother was lying down for a bit, that she hadn't slept properly in days. I asked if there was anything else I could do, and he said Patricia had mentioned needing groceries. I offered to go to the store, grateful for an excuse to leave the oppressive atmosphere of the house. Michael gave me a list, and I drove to the nearby supermarket. When I returned an hour later with bags of groceries, I found Michael sitting on the couch with Patricia's head resting on his shoulder. They were watching television, some old movie I didn't recognize. Patricia had changed into regular clothes, jeans, and a sweater, and she looked more composed. I brought the groceries into the kitchen and started putting them away. Neither Michael nor Patricia came to help. They just sat there, absorbed in the movie, looking comfortable and peaceful in a way that made me feel like an outsider once again. I finished putting away the groceries and walked into the living room. I asked Michael if he wanted to check on Richard, maybe see if he needed anything. Michael looked at me with slight irritation and said that Richard was sleeping, that we shouldn't disturb him. Patricia added, without looking at me, that Richard slept most of the day now, that the medication made him drowsy. I sat down in the armchair across from them and tried to watch the movie, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about how this scenario felt so familiar, so reminiscent of those terrible months when Patricia was constantly in our house, monopolizing Michael's attention. I had thought we had moved past this, but here we were again, and this time I couldn't even object because the situation was genuinely tragic. We stayed at Patricia's house until late that evening. I made dinner using the groceries I had bought, a simple pasta dish with salad. Patricia barely ate, just pushed the food around on her plate while Michael tried to encourage her to take a few bites. After dinner, Richard woke up and asked for water. Michael went to help him, and I offered to go too, thinking it might be good for me to meet Richard properly, to see the man Patricia had married. Michael hesitated, but then agreed. We walked into the bedroom together. Subscribe now if you haven't already. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and each one of you makes this possible. Richard was a thin, pale shadow of what he must have been before the illness. He was propped up on pillows, his eyes sunken, his cheekbones prominent. When he saw Michael, he smiled weakly and said something about being glad to see him. Then his eyes moved to me, and there was a question in them. Michael introduced me as his wife, Sarah, and Richard nodded slowly. He said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, that he was sorry we were meeting under these circumstances, that he had heard nice things about me. I felt a lump form in my throat. This man was dying, and he was still trying to be polite, to make me feel welcome. I told him it was nice to meet him, that I was sorry he was going through this. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again, and looked at Michael. He said, "Take care of Patricia when I'm gone. She's going to need you." Michael's voice was thick with emotion when he replied, "I will. I promise." I felt my heart sink. I knew what that promise meant. It meant more phone calls, more weekends spent here, more of Michael's energy directed toward his mother. On the drive home that night, Michael and I barely spoke. I could feel the weight of unspoken tension between us. When we got home, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind all day. I asked how long he planned to keep spending every weekend at his mother's house. Michael looked at me with a mixture of exhaustion and frustration and said, "As long as she needs me, Sarah. Her husband is dying. What do you expect me to do?" I said I understood that, but that I needed him too, that our marriage needed attention too. He said I was being selfish, that I couldn't possibly compare my needs to what his mother was going through. That word, selfish, hit me like a punch to the gut. It was the same accusation he had thrown at me during our previous crisis with Patricia. I felt tears spring to my eyes, and I turned away so he wouldn't see them. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling completely alone. Michael slept on the couch that night. We didn't talk about it the next morning. He left early for work, and I left for my shift at the hospital. We were two people living in the same house, but existing in separate worlds. Richard died 6 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday morning in April. Michael called me from the hospital where Richard had spent his final days. His voice was hollow when he told me the news. I left work immediately and drove to the hospital. When I arrived, I found Michael sitting in the waiting room with Patricia. She was curled up against him, crying silently, and he had his arms around her. I approached them carefully and expressed my condolences. Patricia looked up at me with tear-streaked face and said, in a voice filled with pain, "I'm all alone now. I have no one." Michael immediately said, "You have me, Mom. You'll always have me." I felt a chill run down my spine. The funeral was held 4 days later, on a Saturday. It was a small service, attended mostly by Richard's relatives and a few friends from the community center where he and Patricia had met. Michael gave a eulogy, speaking about Richard's kindness and his love for Patricia. It was a beautiful speech, and I could see how much effort Michael had put into it. Patricia held his hand throughout the entire service, and afterwards, at the reception, she barely left his side. Your subscription is important to us. If you're enjoying this story and want to see more content like this, please click the subscribe button. It helps us grow and continue sharing these stories. In the weeks following Richard's death, Patricia became even more dependent on Michael. She called him multiple times a day, often crying, saying she couldn't bear to be alone in the house where Richard had died. Michael started suggesting that she come stay with us for a while, just until she felt stronger. I immediately objected. I said it wasn't a good idea, that Patricia needed to learn to cope with her grief in her own space, with professional help if necessary. Michael accused me of being heartless, of not caring about his mother's suffering. We had another huge fight, worse than the ones before. I told Michael that I felt like I was always going to come second to Patricia, that no matter what we had worked through in therapy, his mother would always be his first priority. He said I was being unreasonable, that this was a temporary situation, that his mother had just lost her husband. I said it was always temporary with Patricia, that there was always some crisis, some reason why she needed him more than I did. Michael said something he couldn't take back. He said, "Maybe if you were more compassionate, more understanding, you'd realize that family comes first." I stared at him, feeling like I had been slapped. I said, "I am your family, Michael. I'm your wife. Or have you forgotten that?"
He didn't respond.
He just grabbed his keys and left the house. I didn't know where he went, and I didn't call him. I sat on the couch in the dark living room and cried until I had no tears left. When Michael came back several hours later, he went straight to the bedroom without speaking to me. I slept in the guest room that night, and the night after that, and the night after that. We were living like roommates, barely acknowledging each other's existence. Dr. Carter, our therapist, had retired a few months earlier, and we hadn't found a new one. I realized we needed help again, desperately, before our marriage fell apart completely. I made an appointment with a new therapist, Dr. Marcus Jensen, and I told Michael he needed to come with me. He agreed, though reluctantly. In our first session with Dr. Jensen, I poured out everything that had been happening since Richard's death. Michael defended his actions, saying he was just trying to be a good son. Dr. Jensen listened carefully and then asked Michael a pointed question. "Do you think it's possible to be a good son and a good husband at the same time?" Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't know. I feel like I'm being torn in two." Dr. Jensen nodded and said, "That's because you're trying to be everything to everyone, and it's not sustainable. You need to make choices, set priorities, and communicate those priorities clearly to both your mother and your wife." Over the next few sessions, Dr. Jensen helped Michael see that his relationship with Patricia had become unhealthy, that he was enabling her dependence on him rather than encouraging her to develop her own support system and coping mechanisms. Press the subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. We're building this community together, and your participation matters. Dr. Jensen suggested that Michael encourage Patricia to join a grief support group, to see a therapist of her own, and to reconnect with friends and other family members. Michael was resistant at first. He felt like he would be abandoning his mother if he stepped back. But Dr. Jensen explained that true help sometimes means creating space for someone to grow stronger on their own, rather than becoming a permanent crutch. It was a hard lesson for Michael to learn, but slowly, he started to understand. Michael had a difficult conversation with Patricia. He told her that he loved her, that he wanted to support her, but that he couldn't be her only source of emotional support. He encouraged her to join a grief counseling group at a local church, and he set boundaries around their phone calls and visits. Patricia reacted badly at first. She cried. She accused Michael of abandoning her when she needed him most. She even called me and blamed me for turning her son against her. I didn't engage. I simply told her that Michael was making his own decisions, that I supported him, and that she should consider the resources he had suggested. Gradually, things started to change. Patricia did join the grief support group, and she started seeing a therapist. She made friends with other widows in the group, women who understood what she was going through. She started to call Michael less frequently, And when she did call, the conversations were shorter and less emotionally intense. Michael and I started to reconnect. We went on date nights, something we hadn't done in months. We talked, really talked, about our fears, our needs, our dreams for the future. The distance between us started to close. One evening, about 5 months after Richard's death, Patricia called and asked if she could come over for dinner. Not to stay, not to monopolize Michael's time, just to have a meal with us. I was nervous, but I agreed. When she arrived, she brought a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers for me. She looked healthier than she had in months, her eyes clear, her posture more upright. During dinner, she actually asked me about my work, about my life, showing genuine interest. She told us about the women in her grief group, about a pottery class she had started taking, about a trip she was planning to visit her sister in Oregon. Subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this journey. Your support helps us create more stories and reach more people. It was the first time I had seen Patricia as a complete person, not just as an obstacle to my marriage or a needy presence in our lives. After dinner, as we were having coffee, Patricia said something that surprised me. She said, "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I didn't respect your marriage, and I made things very difficult for you. I was so focused on my own needs that I didn't consider how my behavior was affecting you and Michael. I'm sorry." I was stunned. I hadn't expected an apology, especially not one that seemed so sincere. I said, "Thank you, Patricia. That means a lot." She nodded and then turned to Michael. She said, "You raised me right. Even though I'm supposed to be the one who raised you, you showed me that love sometimes means letting go, giving people space to grow. I'm grateful for that lesson, even though it was hard to learn." Michael had tears in his eyes, and so did I. It felt like a turning point, a moment of genuine healing. From that point on, Patricia became a healthier presence in our lives. She visited occasionally, always calling ahead, always respecting our time and space. She built her own life, filled with friends, hobbies, and new experiences. Michael and I continued with therapy, working on our communication and our ability to navigate challenges together. We talked about having children someday, about buying a bigger house, about the future we wanted to build. Our marriage became stronger, more resilient, because we had weathered these storms together. Looking back now, almost 2 years after that morning when I found Patricia in my kitchen wearing Michael's shirt, I can see how much we've all grown. Michael learned to set boundaries and balance his relationships. Patricia learned to be more independent and to respect our marriage. And I learned that fighting for your marriage doesn't mean being aggressive or confrontational. It means being clear about your needs, being willing to have difficult conversations, and being patient while people learn and change. It means recognizing that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day, a commitment you honor even when it's hard. Michael and I celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary last month. We went to a small bed and breakfast in Vermont, surrounded by fall foliage and crisp autumn air. On our last evening there, as we sat by a fireplace with glasses of wine, Michael took my hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. I know I didn't make it easy." I squeezed his hand and said, "We both had to learn. We both had to grow. That's what marriage is about." He smiled and said, "I love you, Sarah. You're my priority, my partner, my home." Those words, which I had waited so long to hear, filled my heart with warmth and gratitude. If you've been following this story and haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Click that button and become part of our growing community. Patricia is doing well. She's dating someone new, a retired veterinarian she met through her pottery class. She seems happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen before. She and I have developed a cordial, respectful relationship. We'll never be best friends, but we don't need to be. We've found a way to coexist peacefully, to support Michael without competing for his attention, to respect each other's roles in his life. That's enough. The experience taught me that families are complicated, that relationships require constant work and adjustment, and that boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out but frameworks that allow relationships to be healthy and sustainable. It taught me that you can't control other people's behavior, but you can control your own responses and your own choices. Most importantly, it taught me that a strong marriage is built on mutual respect, clear communication, and the willingness to prioritize each other even when external pressures try to pull you apart. I still work as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I still come home exhausted after long shifts. But now, when I open the door to my house, I know what I'll find. I'll find my husband, my partner, the man who finally learned to choose me. I'll find a home that is truly mine, a space that hasn't been invaded or compromised. I'll find peace, hard-won and precious. And that makes all the struggle, all the tears, all the difficult conversations worth it. Because in the end, we didn't just save our marriage. We transformed it into something stronger, something resilient, something worth fighting for. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to give up, moments when I thought the damage was too deep to repair. But I held on, and so did Michael, and together we found our way back to each other. Patricia found her way to a healthier place too. It took time, patience, and a lot of hard work from all of us. But change is possible. Growth is possible. Healing is possible. You just have to be willing to do the work, to face the uncomfortable truths, to have the difficult conversations, and to keep showing up, even when it's hard. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, if you feel like you're losing yourself in your own marriage, if you feel like you're competing with family members for your partner's attention, I want you to know that you're not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your needs matter. And it's okay to stand up for yourself, to ask for what you need, to set boundaries. It doesn't make you selfish or heartless. It makes you someone who values themselves and their relationship. And that's something worth celebrating. One last thing before I close this chapter of my story. Subscribe to this channel if you found something valuable here, if this story resonated with you in any way. We're building a community of people who believe in the power of honest storytelling, who understand that life is messy and complicated and beautiful all at once. Your subscription helps us continue doing this work, sharing these stories, creating this space for real conversations about real life. Thank you for listening, for being here, for being part of this journey. It means more than you know.